Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am bringing you guys my January 2021 TBR, and as usual I am so excited for this video. I love talking about books that I am just excited to read. So without further ado, let's just get into it. The first three books that I want to mention are books that I do not own physical copies of yet. But the first one is A Vow So Bold and Deadly by Brigid Kemmerer. This is book 3 and the final book, as far as I know, of her Curse So Dark and Lonely series. And you guys may know that A Curse So Dark and Lonely, the first book, was one of my top favorite books of 2019. I love that first book so much. Unfortunately, A Heart So Fierce and Broken did disappoint me a little bit. So I am excited and a little bit scared for this third and final book. I really hope that it brings it, and I love it just as much, if not more, than the first book. Then the next book I want to get to this month is The Year of the Witching by Alexis Henderson. I'm supposed to be getting in my loan for the audiobook and the ebook really soon from my Libby app. And this is a horror novel that I've actually talked about before in my discussion about horror novels in general. I will link that video up in the cards above. But this one is definitely more of a dark fantasy with horror elements. All I really know is that this takes place in a puritanical society, and our main character may or may not be a witch, and I know that it has to do heavily with these dark and forbidden woods that are nearby the village that she lives in. So I'm really looking forward to reading this, and I think this is book 1 in a series. I don't think it's a standalone. And then the third book that I want to read that I don't have a physical copy of yet is White Hot by Ilona Andrews. So in case you didn't know, Ilona Andrews is actually a husband and wife author duo. This is book 2 in their Hidden Legacy series. I read book 1, which is called Burn for Me, a couple of months ago, and that book completely blew me away. You know, these covers do look really cheesy, but I promise you that this is actually high quality urban fantasy. So I highly recommend the first book at least. And the first book only had like a little dash of romance, so I do think that this series centers a lot more on other things and not just the romance. There's definitely a really complex and interesting world with this Hidden Legacy series. It takes place in kind of like a post-apocalyptic Houston, and there are these magical families, and we have primes. They are the most powerful mages or magic users in this society, and I don't want to get too far into the plot of this, but this first trilogy does center around Nevada, who is our main heroine, and she doesn't really have a strong magic ability, but she does have the ability to tell truths from lies, which I think is very useful considering that she is a private investigator. And then we have Rogan, who is her love interest, and he is a prime. He is a very powerful person, and so I'm really interested to see where the story goes after the way that the first book ended. All right, so next on to the books that I do own physical copies of. The first one is Devil in Winter by Lisa Kleypas. I have been saving this book for January because I knew that I wanted to read this book during the winter time. So this is the third book in her Wallflowers series. I will be honest with you guys, this series has been a little hit or miss for me personally. The first book, Secrets of a Summer Night, I really didn't like all that much. I think I gave it like a 2.5 or a 3 stars. Then I read It Happened One Autumn, gave that one 4 stars, almost like 4.5. I really enjoyed that book. And then this one is like unanimously celebrated amongst Lisa Kleypas fans. Definitely one of her top favorite books amongst the romance community, at least. And what I will say about this series is that I love the 4 women that we follow. It is about the wallflowers, of course, and each book is about each of the different wallflowers, and I love the friendship that they have with one another and their personalities. They are very entertaining characters, so I really hope that I love this third book as much as everybody else. Next, we have a book that has been staring at me from my shelves for the past couple of months, and I have been meaning to get to it, and I knew that January was the perfect time to do so, and that is Spoiler Alert by Olivia Dade. Now, Olivia Dade is a plus-size author herself who has written some romance novels that I think are indie published. So as far as I know, this is her first book that is being published with a big publisher. Avon published this one, and so this one centers around Marcus, who is an actor on one of the biggest television shows ever at the moment. But he also writes fan fiction for the show that he's starring in, which I think is just awesome. And then we have April, who is a hardcore fan of the TV show that Marcus stars in, and she is also really into fanfic and cosplay. And so basically her latest costume creation goes really viral on Twitter, and I think a lot of people attack her for cosplaying a character that maybe isn't meant to be plus sized or some bullshit like that. And so Marcus asks her out to spite her internet critics, and truth officially becomes stranger than fan fiction. So that sounds absolutely amazing. I have heard some really phenomenal things about this book. Next is an adult fantasy romance that I have been wanting to read for so long. I have had this book on my shelves for quite a few months at this point, and it is just so hyped up, and it actually won Best Romance for the Goodreads Choice Awards for the romance category this year, and that is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I have heard that this is perfect for fans of Sarah J. Maas and Laura Thalassa, who I believe is the author of the Rhapsody trilogy. I think that's what that series is called. But yes, so many people that I trust and follow here on BookTube absolutely adore this series. There are 2 books that are out right now. It's this one and then A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire, which is also already on my shelves, and you can bet your butt that I have already pre-ordered the 3rd book. All that I can really tell you about this series is that we are following Poppy, who is a maiden, and in her kingdom that is a very important role. She has to stay pure. She can't really have any romantic relationships or anything like that. And then this guy Hawk comes into her life as a bodyguard for her, and things get really interesting from there. This is a very chunky book, but I have a feeling that I'm going to devour this next month. So in January and in the winter months in general, I really like reading science fiction, so I decided to go with The Martian by Andy Weir. You may recall that this was a part of my 21 books that I want to read in 2021. I will of course link that video up in the cards above. I feel like at this point this is a classic science fiction book, and my copy says soon to be a major motion picture. It already is a major motion picture starring Matt Damon, so I'm really excited to watch the movie after I read this. And from what I understand, our main character finds himself stranded on Mars and no way to single Earth that he's alive, which that sounds like the most terrifying thing that I can think of. But I've also heard that there's like a quirky sense of humor to it, so I'm really excited to finally get to this next month. And then next up we have the 4th book in what has quickly become one of my favorite paranormal romance series ever. So that is Succubus Heat by Rochelle Mead. This is book 4 in the Succubus Blues or the Georgina Kincaid series. You guys know that I love these books so much. I have given every book up to this point 5 stars, and I have a feeling that this book is going to be no different. Georgina Kincaid, who is a succubus, she is one of my like all-time favorite main characters ever at this point, so I cannot wait to see where her story goes in this next book. Next we have a book that I put the hold for the audiobook like months ago at this point, and I just keep deferring my hold until I get in the mood to read it. So I'm just deciding to make myself read this book in January because I've just heard nothing but great things about it, and that is Queenie. This is by Candace Carty Williams. So I've heard this compared to Bridget Jones's Diary. That's really all I know about it. It says, meet Queenie, journalist, catastrophist, lonely, loved, relatable. Her boyfriend has asked her to leave their apartment. Her boss doesn't seem to see her. Her Jamaican British family doesn't seem to hear her. Her best friends try but fail to help her. Queenie is in a spiral. As she careens from one questionable decision to another, she finds herself wondering, what are you doing? Why are you doing it? Who do you want to be? All of the quandaries today's woman must face in a world trying to answer them for her. Like I said, I've heard phenomenal things about this. This sounds like it's going to be a very relatable book, especially for women that are in their 20s like myself. Next is another book that was on my 21 books I want to read in 2021 list, and that is Allegedly by Tiffany D. Jackson. It is well past time that I finally start reading this author's works. She has written quite a few basically YA thrillers is how I would describe her books, and this is one of her backlist titles that I thought would be the perfect book to start with. All that I know is that this is about our character Mary B. Addison. She killed a baby allegedly. She didn't say much in the first interview with detectives, and the media filled in the only blanks that mattered. A white baby had died while under the care of a church-going black woman and her 9-year-old daughter. So that sounds really compelling. I have heard nothing but amazing things about Tiffany D. Jackson in general. Like, literally all of her books get amazing reviews. Next up, we have Find Me Their Bones by Sarah Wolf. This is book 2 in the Bring Me Their Hearts trilogy. I think that's what the trilogy is called. So I read Bring Me Their Hearts, I want to say last month? Yeah, in November. This is a series that centers around our main character, Zara, and essentially this witch literally took her heart, and Zara is now known as a Heartless, where she's kind of human, she's kind of not, because I think if a witch has your heart, you're now immortal. And so the first book is all about this interesting romance that Zara has with Prince Lucian, who is the man whose heart she is supposed to steal so that the witch that owns her heart will let her go, essentially. I hope that made sense, but I really enjoyed that first book. I gave it 4 stars. I haven't looked up any reviews of this second or the third book, so I'm just going into this pretty blind, but I love this cover. I think the cover art is just stunning. Next up, we have another Beauty and the Beast retelling. We all know at this point that I am trash for any kind of reimagining or retelling of Beauty and the Beast. I just adore that story so much. And this is Hunted by Megan Spooner. This is a very, very reflective cover. I will say I've heard kind of mixed things about this book, but overall pretty positive things. This is a YA retelling of the story, and it says, Beauty knows the Beast's forests in her bones and in her blood. She knows that the forest holds secrets and that her father is the only hunter who's ever come close to discovering them. But Yave has grown up far from her father's old lodge, raised to be part of the city's highest caste of aristocrats. Still, she's never forgotten the feel of a bow in her hands, and she spent a lifetime longing for the freedom of the hunt. And so basically, Yeva's father goes missing in the woods, and so Yeva is trying to find the creature that her father had been obsessively tracking just before his disappearance. So this sounds like a really interesting take on the story. All right, guys, we have just a couple more books. The first one is The Extraordinaries by TJ Klune. So ever since reading The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune, I knew that I needed to check out all of his backlist titles. And from what I understand, this is his first and only YA series. So that's really exciting. I have heard this compared to Fangirl and Renegades by Marissa Meyer, which that sounds like a really interesting combination. And based on the synopsis, we have Nick, who is a fan fiction writer. So he lives in a world with masked superheroes that have superpowers. So he has a chance encounter with Shadowstar, Nova City's mightiest hero and Nick's biggest crush, and that changes everything. Nick is no longer satisfied writing about heroes. He wants to become one, so that sounds really fun. And then, oh, this is so cool! The inside of the dust jacket has like all of this cool art on it. That is so awesome. Yes, there are so many elements in this book that sound absolutely spectacular to me, so I cannot wait to read this ASAP. And last but certainly not least, we have Red Rising by Pierce Brown. This is yet another book that I featured in my 21 books to read in 2021. This is a dystopian slash science fiction series that has been sitting on my shelves for a very long time. I meant to read it in 2020, but unfortunately that didn't happen. Basically, all I can tell you about this is that this is a world where there's a caste system based on colors. So Darrow, our main character, is a red, a member of the lowest caste in the color-coded society of the future. Like his fellow Reds, he works all day, believing that he and his people are making the surface of Mars livable for future generations. Then it says, yet Darrow and his kind have been betrayed. Soon he discovers that humanity already reached the surface generations ago. Vast cities and sprawling parks spread across the planet. Darrow, the Reds like him, are nothing more than slaves to a decadent ruling class. And then I know at some point he becomes a gold, I think, which is the highest caste in the society. And of course, I'm sure this is going to turn into one of those series where it's all about taking down the current government and all of that. So yes, I've heard nothing but rave reviews about this series, so it just needs to happen in January. All right, guys, that's going to be it for this January TBR. I would love it if you would leave a comment with the snowman emoji. I will leave the picture over here if you got to this point in the video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you in advance if you do. And with that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!